She had a miscarriage and lost their baby after her millionaire CEO husband ignored her. So she vanished. Ezrin, please. Her voice was thin, wet with panic. I'm bleeding. But her millionaire husband never looked up. One more deal. One more call. Just a few more minutes. By the time he reached the hospital, their daughter was already gone. And by morning, so was she. Vanished. 3 years later, he opened a gallery envelope with no return address. Signed by a name he didn't recognize, but a pain he'd never forgotten. Have you ever been so focused on what you thought mattered, that you lost what truly did? Welcome to Mr Hearthline Stories, where every story heals, teaches, and reminds us what really matters. If you're watching tonight, drop a heart in the comments and tell us where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's begin. You have one new voicemail. The robotic voice broke through the sterile hum of the hospital room. The nurse hit the button again, glancing at the screen. Her shift was ending, but her heart hadn't. Nova Vance's body trembled on the gurney as another contraction ripped through her too early labor. A thin trail of blood stained the hospital sheet beneath her thighs. Her face was pale, lips parted, lashes wet from tears long dried. Please, she whispered, barely audible. Her hand reached out into the dark like she was calling for someone from a dream. Ezrin. But he wasn't coming. Not yet. Across the Pacific, under the cold wash of Tokyo Glass and Skyline Steel, Ezrin Vance, CEO of Vance Global Solutions, stood at the head of a towering conference table, jaw sharp, cufflinks catching light. I need 30 more minutes, he muttered into his Bluetooth earpiece. His assistant's voice on the other end was strained. Sir, it's the hospital. Your wife's doctor has called 3 times. Emergency. Ezrin didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on the screen. Final figures of a merger that would redefine the company's global dominance. Just hold the calls. I'm almost done. He flipped the phone over on the polished table, ignoring the buzz that came seconds later. At 3:47 a.m., in a New York hospital room dimly lit by a blinking 4 machine, Nova screamed. Doctors pushed in fast. 90 over 50. She's losing blood. Let's move stat. The room burst into controlled chaos. Nurses holding her legs, a mask pressed to her face, monitors spiking. But the only name she said again and again was Ezrin, the father who wasn't there. By the time he arrived, hours later, sleeves rolled, tie undone. The hallway outside the OR was quiet. No sounds of monitors. No doctors running. Just a humming machine behind a desk and the tapping of keys. He stood, disoriented. Nova Vance? He asked the nurse in scrubs. She looked up, and in her silence he knew. A door opened down the hall. A different nurse walked past, wheeling out a bassinet, empty. He found her in a room with the blinds closed. The bouquet of lilies in his hand felt like mockery. She lay curled on her side, and 4 still taped to her wrist. The faint rise and fall of her chest the only sign she was still with him. Nova, he said softly, setting the flowers down. She didn't move. I'm so sorry, he tried again, closer this time. The meeting ran over. I didn't think it would be that fast. I thought. He stopped. What excuse did you make to a woman who had just lost her child while you negotiated a deal? Her eyes opened, slowly. She looked at him. No tears. No rage. Just silence that felt heavier than screams. Ezrin reached for her hand. She turned her face away. For the next 2 weeks, the penthouse grew quieter by the day. The nursery stayed locked. The crib remained untouched. The mobile above it didn't move. Nova didn't yell. She didn't break dishes. She didn't sleepwalk or cry on the balcony like the characters in the movies did. She just drifted. In the mornings, she sat in the kitchen wrapped in her robe, staring at the steam rising from untouched tea. In the afternoons, she walked the same hallway 3 times, then went back to bed. At night, she lay beside him without touch or words. And Ezrin didn't know how to ask for forgiveness from someone who had every right to vanish. You need to talk, the grief counselor said during one of her in-home sessions. Nova nodded politely, lips still. She might hear you even now. Naming your daughter could help you process. Nova's fingers flexed in her lap. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but certain. I don't want to say her name out loud for someone who didn't show up for her. And that was the last session. Then one morning Ezrin came home to stillness. Stillness wasn't new, but this time it was hollow. Her shoes were by the door. Her phone was in the drawer. Her purse was still in the closet. No credit card pings. No rideshare logs. No flight records. The private nurse thought she'd gone up to the rooftop garden. She hadn't. By noon, Ezrin had called security, the police, every airline they'd ever used. She hadn't left the country, but she wasn't anywhere. No note, no video, no voicemail, no fingerprints on the day. Nova Vance was simply gone. Nova opened her eyes to a low beeping sound and a slice of morning sun falling across the hospital blanket. Her hand drifted automatically to her stomach. Flat now, bandaged, still aching. Her first thought wasn't of death. It was of absence. The empty chair beside her bed said everything. A nurse stepped in quietly, checking her chart. Mrs. Vance, your vitals look stable. We'll remove the 4 this afternoon. Nova gave a tiny nod, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Would you like me to call your husband again? The nurse offered. Nova closed her eyes. He'll come, she murmured, but there was no conviction in it. Hours later, footsteps rushed down the corridor. A man's voice at the desk, urgent. Room 418, Nova Vance? The door opened. Ezrin filled the doorway. Tie loose, hair mussed, an expensive suit looking out of place under fluorescent lights. His hands clutched a bouquet of lilies, but his face was ashen. Nova, his voice cracked. I'm here. She didn't move. I'm so sorry, he said, stepping closer. I thought we had time. He set the flowers on the nightstand. The petals brushed against the plastic water cup. Please, he whispered. Say something. Nova turned her head slightly, her eyes landing on him. For a moment, the image of the man she had married flickered. The man who had laughed with her in the rain, who had promised he'd always show up. But standing in front of her now was someone else. A stranger wearing his face. I needed you, she said quietly. Her voice was steady but thin. You weren't there. Ezrin opened his mouth, closed it again, sat down. I made a mistake. The deal. Her eyes hardened. Our daughter died while you negotiated a deal. The words hung in the air like a verdict. He flinched, hands clenching. I can't undo what happened, he said. But I can be here now. Nova looked away, tears slipping silently toward her pillow. I don't know if now matters anymore, she whispered. For the next week, he tried. He came to every appointment, brought meals she didn't touch, canceled meetings, answered his own phone. But the distance between them was no longer measured in miles. It was measured in trust, and trust had bled out of her like the life they had lost. At night, when they returned to the penthouse, he would stand outside the nursery door, palm against the wood, unable to open it. Inside, the crib still waited. The mobile still hung above it. A soft blanket embroidered with the name they had never spoken aloud lay folded in the corner. Nova, meanwhile, sat on the couch with a mug of tea, staring at the city lights. He tried again. We can get through this, he said one evening. She didn't look up. You can't arrive after the end and pretend you were part of the story. Ezrin's throat tightened. I was wrong, he said. I see that now. Nova's eyes stayed on the window. Do you? The grief counselor came twice a week. She tried to draw them both out with soft questions, grounding exercises, gentle suggestions. Nova barely spoke. Ezrin over-explained. One session ended with the counselor turning to him. Mr. Vance, she doesn't need speeches. She needs presence. He swallowed hard, nodded, reached for Nova's hand. She pulled away. The counselor's eyes softened. Sometimes trauma creates a silence no apology can cross. It has to be lived through. One night, after another failed conversation, Ezrin sat at his desk staring at his phone. He had built empires out of negotiations, but here, at his own kitchen table, he couldn't find the words that might save his marriage. Across the apartment, Nova stood on the balcony, her robe pulled tight against the wind. She stared down at the city, tears tracing silent lines down her cheeks. She had once believed in forever, but forever had turned out to be a room where you bled alone while your husband talked numbers half a world away. The next morning, the penthouse felt emptier. The air itself seemed thin. Nova moved through it like a ghost, speaking less, sleeping more. Ezrin watched her retreat and felt something inside him fray. He had been too late for his daughter, and now he feared he was too late for his wife. The morning began like any other. Soft light poured through the bedroom curtains. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. Ezrin stirred awake to the scent of chamomile and silence. "Nova?" he called out, pushing the sheets aside. No answer. He padded barefoot to the kitchen. The teacup sat untouched on the counter, steam long gone cold. Her robe still hung by the door. He checked the balcony. Empty. The guest bathroom? Empty. The nursery? Still locked. Untouched. "Nova?" he called again, louder this time. Still no answer. He moved through the penthouse faster now, checking every room, opening closets, calling her name as the silence thickened around him. Then he saw it. Her shoes were still by the door. Her phone was in the drawer. Her purse was untouched on the entry table. Everything she needed to leave hadn't moved. Panic set in like cold water. He called the private nurse. "Where is she?" "She was on the balcony this morning when I left," the nurse replied, confused. "Said she needed fresh air." That was 3 hours ago. Ezrin called building security. Then the doorman. Then the concierge. No one had seen her leave. No cameras had captured her stepping out. It was as if she had dissolved into air. By noon, his voice was hoarse from shouting. By 3 p.m., the police were on site. By 5, the story had leaked to the tabloids. CEO's wife disappears days after tragic loss. Ezrin shut down all external PR immediately. What he needed wasn't a narrative. He needed her. He froze their accounts. Checked every card statement, every flight record, every train log. Nothing. He called her sister. No answer. Her college roommate. No clue. The grief counselor. "She seemed quieter lately," was all the woman said. He searched the rooftops. Every airfield she might have accessed. Private jet records. Boat registries. Still nothing. Not even a digital trail. Nova Vance had simply vanished. That night, Ezrin sat in the center of their living room, surrounded by everything she left behind. Her sketchpad on the couch, her slippers tucked beneath the ottoman, the music playlist she used to fall asleep still queued up on the tablet. He picked up the sketchpad. On the last page was a drawing. A woman curled in a fetal position, lines jagged and stark. Her belly was hollow. Her arms cradled nothing. The background was just black space. No walls. No exit. Just void. Ezrin stared at the drawing until his eyes burned. It wasn't just a portrait. It was a goodbye he had missed. The next day, he launched a private investigation team. The best in the country. They combed through surveillance feeds, canvassed train stations, checked rural routes, safe houses, shelters, women's retreats. They found no evidence of harm. No ransom. No trace of her body. Nothing. 2 weeks later, the team lead handed Ezrin the report. "Mr. Vance. There's no indication she was taken. No sign of struggle. All signs point to a deliberate disappearance." Ezrin's hands clenched the folder. "People don't just vanish," he snapped. The man hesitated. "Sometimes, people decide to disappear. On purpose." For the first time in his life, Ezrin Vance, master strategist, public giant, industry titan, had no idea what to do next. The man who built towers couldn't find his wife. The man who made markets move couldn't track the only thing that mattered. The man who didn't show up was now alone. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Nova vanished. 3 birthdays passed without candles. 3 winters without closure. 3 years of Ezrin waking up to the sound of silence. He never stopped searching. Not in the traditional sense. Eventually the detectives grew quiet, the paper trail ran dry. But he kept her toothbrush on the sink. He kept the crib assembled. He never gave her closet away. Now, at 39, Ezrin Vance stood beneath the vaulted ceilings of the VGS annual gala, smiling at everyone and feeling absolutely nothing. Applause thundered as the MC announced the company's largest merger to date. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise a glass to the man who turned Vance Global into a multinational powerhouse. Mr. Ezrin Vance. Flashbulbs popped. People stood. He offered a smile. But inside, his heartbeat felt artificial. His assistant, Grant, stepped close and whispered, "Should I hold your next meeting until after the press photos?" Ezrin shook his head. "Give me 2 minutes. I just need air." He stepped away from the noise, past the champagne towers and velvet ropes, stopping at the edge of the ballroom, his back to the crowd. That's when Grant returned, holding out a white envelope. No return address, just dropped off at reception with your name on it. No one saw who. Ezrin raised an eyebrow. "Probably another charity pitch," Grant muttered. But Ezrin had already turned the envelope over. No logo, no sender. Just 3 words handwritten on the back flap. The silence between heartbeats. His chest tightened. He opened it slowly, like the paper might crumble in his hands. Inside was a single invitation card, thick, matte, elegant. Opening night. The silence between heartbeats. Artist, End, Vale. Location, Charleston, South Carolina. And scribbled in the bottom corner, so small he almost missed it, "Sometimes grief needs a frame to be seen." He didn't need a signature. The handwriting, it was hers. He dropped the card once, picked it up with trembling hands. The ballroom behind him vanished. All that remained was the memory of Nova's sketchpad. The way her S curved like a ribbon. No forger could copy that. No one else would know that phrase. Grief needs a frame to be seen. Ezrin moved fast. Within minutes, he had canceled the rest of the weekend's meetings, told Grant to reroute his jet, and instructed the house manager to lock down the penthouse. "Charleston?" Grant asked, bewildered. Ezrin nodded. Now. The flight to South Carolina was quiet. He sat by the window staring at nothing. No TV. No bourbon. Just the card in his hands. His mind wrestled with a single question. Why now? He arrived just after sunset the next evening. The gallery was tucked between a florist and a bookshop on a cobbled side street. The windows glowed with soft gold light. A chalkboard outside read, "Tonight only." The silence between heartbeats. Limited viewing. No mention of the artist. No press. Just a hush. Inside, a small crowd moved from canvas to canvas. Linen outfits. Bare shoulders. Quiet murmurs. Jazz hummed faintly through the walls. Ezrin entered like a ghost among them. His tailored suit made him stand out, but he didn't care. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to see her. Then he saw it. Near the center of the gallery. One spotlight. One canvas. Untitled. But he knew. A woman lay in a stark hospital room, her hands over her belly. A bloom of red spread beneath her. A man stood near the edge of the frame, his back turned, staring at a phone. Ezrin staggered. His breath caught. His hands went cold. He didn't just recognize the scene. He remembered it. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from beside him, older, feminine, gentle. He turned to see a silver-haired woman, her fingers stained faintly with paint. The gallery curator. Maybe. She said you might come, the woman added. Told me to give you this. She held out a folded slip of paper. Ezrin took it slowly, cautiously. His fingers trembled before he even read the words. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., the rose garden by the pier, if you still care. And he closed his eyes. Nova. She wasn't just alive. She was watching. She had framed the night he ruined everything. Hung it on a wall. Invited strangers to see what he couldn't bear to face. But she was also offering him something else. A chance. That night Ezrin didn't sleep. He paced his hotel room for hours. Thought about what to say. thought about whether he should say anything at all. He didn't know if this was goodbye or beginning. He only knew he had to be there. The rose garden still held morning dew when Ezrin arrived just after 7:40 a.m. Charleston's coast had dressed the morning in a curtain of light mist. The air smelled of salt and old flowers. He tucked his hands into his coat, trying to calm his nerves. The garden stretched along the pier, hedges trimmed low, roses spilling over arched trellises, benches resting beneath wrought iron lanterns. He scanned the curves of the path. No sign of her yet. He sat. The last time they'd spoken face to face, she had bled, and he had been late. Now he was early and uncertain. By 8:06 a.m., he began to wonder if the note had been a test, or worse, a goodbye masked as an invitation. Then he heard footsteps, soft, measured. She appeared through the mist like a memory. Hair shorter now, cut just above the shoulders. Clothes simple, loose, linen. A crossbody bag slung across her chest. Her eyes, once soft with hope, now held a different shape. Still, focused, unreadable. Nova didn't smile, didn't rush. She stopped a few feet from the bench, hands loosely at her sides. Ezrin stood slowly. Nova! He said her name like a vow. She looked at him. You found the painting, she said plainly. I did. Their eyes held a long, fragile moment between them. You painted what I never had the courage to face, he added. A pause. Then her voice again, strong even. Why did you come? Ezrin took a breath. Because I couldn't stay away. Because I've lived with the sound of that silence every day since. Nova tilted her head slightly. I didn't invite you to reopen wounds, she said. I wanted to know if you'd even recognize them. He nodded. I do now. But I should have then. They sat, not touching. The garden was quiet. Only the distant hum of water and the rustle of wind through petals. I wasn't sure if I'd show up, she admitted. What changed? I can look at you now without breaking. Her eyes didn't waver. Because I painted my way back to the surface. Because she deserved to be remembered. Ezrin swallowed. She had a name. Nova's fingers curled slightly. Zara, he said. Zara Grace. Nova blinked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You never said it before. I didn't think I deserved to. You didn't, she said. Not then. They let the quiet stretch again. No rush. No pressure. I died that night too, she said. Not just Zara. Me. The version of me that trusted you to show up. Ezrin lowered his gaze. I failed you. She nodded. Yes, you did. It wasn't anger. It was a fact. Delivered with the weight of truth. I've read every article, he said after a moment. Watched every gallery opening with your name buried in it. I even drove past a grief retreat once because someone mentioned your paintings were displayed there. Nova turned slightly toward him. And yet, you never came. I didn't want to be a shadow in your recovery, he said. But when that envelope arrived, I couldn't stay away. She looked back out at the garden. You were always good with words, Ezrin. But presence. That was always the part you got wrong. He nodded. I'm learning. Then, with a breath so soft it might have been a release, she said, walk with me. They moved slowly side by side. Down the garden's path. Along the edge of the pier. Past couples with coffee and joggers brushing past. She told him about the collective of artists she worked with. About the small house she rented by the marsh. About the women who came to her studio to paint their grief in brushstrokes when words failed. They sit in silence sometimes for hours, she said. Then one will cry, or paint, or both. And you? He asked. I do both, she replied. Sometimes in the same hour. He hesitated, then said, I started a foundation in Zara's name. Nova looked over, her expression unreadable. Pediatric grief retreats. End-of-life funding. I turned down 2 board seats. Couldn't sit in another room that reminded me of her absence. She kept walking. I kept the crib, he added. I thought about taking it down. But you couldn't. No. He looked ahead. I talk to her sometimes. In my head. In the mirror. I tell her about the world. About you. Nova turned her face slightly, and he caught the faint shimmer in her eyes. Do you ever wonder, she whispered, what she would have been like? Every day. They stopped walking. A gust of wind danced through the trees. She would have had your eyes, he said softly. But your stubbornness. You'd have been a fierce mother. She smiled just barely. Then her voice cracked. I never wanted to disappear, Ezrin. I know. But I couldn't breathe in that penthouse. Every room was heavy with what never got to be. I would have left it all behind, he said. I didn't need you to leave it. I needed you to be there with me. When it counted. They stood in silence, not as enemies. Not as lovers. Just two people holding the same ache from different sides of a broken photograph. They reached the corner where the pier ended, and the city began again. The bench they stopped at looked out over calm water. Boats drifted in the distance. A gull circled above. Nova turned to him. I want to show you something, she said. Ezrin looked at her. Anything. Her voice lowered. It's not easy to look at, but it's where I found air again. They walked 5 blocks in silence. Nova unlocked a tall wooden door set between 2 red brick buildings. No sign. No windows. Just paint smudges along the lower edge of the doorframe. She pushed it open. Inside was a converted carriage house. Bare walls, concrete floors, soft afternoon light spilling through a skylight. Ezrin paused at the threshold. Come in, she said gently. It's not haunted, just honest. The space was quiet, sacred. Paintings lined the walls, framed, unframed, stacked. Some were large and raw, others delicate and restrained. Each one carried a pulse of something personal. This is where I learned to breathe again, Nova said, walking ahead of him. Ezrin followed, letting his eyes move from one canvas to the next. I didn't want to talk to anyone, she said. Didn't want advice. I just wanted to be left alone with color. He stopped in front of one canvas. A woman standing alone in a field of gray, her mouth wide open in a scream, but no sound painted from her throat. That one's called Mute Rage, Nova explained. Finished it the week after I arrived here. He nodded slowly. It feels still and violent at the same time. That's exactly how it felt. They moved deeper into the studio. A corner was filled with used brushes, stained rags, half-squeezed tubes of oil paint. There was a table with teacups, 3 cracked mugs, and a single worn photograph. Nova holding a paintbrush, hair longer, smile soft. Ezrin touched the edge of the photo. She still existed somewhere beneath it all, she said quietly, watching him. Did you ever want to call me? Sometimes. What stopped you? Nova turned and walked to the far wall. There, mounted with 4 nails, was a painting unlike the others. Subtle, tender, and devastating. A child of light, small, glowing, standing between 2 adults blurred into shadows. The child reached for them both, but her hands passed through. They weren't touching her, just watching. Ezrin moved closer. He didn't need to ask. That's her, he whispered. Nova nodded. That one was the hardest to paint. He stepped forward, staring at the small figure. His eyes traced every detail, down to the halo of gold around the child's head, the quiet ache of separation in her posture. I see both of us, he said. I painted it the day I forgave myself, Nova said. Not you, not yet, but me. Ezrin's eyes stayed locked on the canvas. She's beautiful, Nova exhaled slowly. She came to me in a dream. She wasn't crying, just waiting. He turned. She was standing only a few steps away now, closer than she had allowed herself to be. Their eyes locked. Nova, don't speak, she said, voice thin but unshaking. Just hold me. He moved toward her slowly, like approaching a fragile sculpture. And then, after 3 years of distance, silence, and unanswered questions, he wrapped his arms around her. Not tightly, not in desperation, just enough to tell her, I'm still here. I will not disappear. She pressed her face into his shoulder, and her breath hitched. And for the first time in years, they stood in the same moment without timelines, regrets, or defense. Just grief and breath. That night, she didn't ask him to stay. But she didn't ask him to leave either. They sat on the floor of her studio with blankets around their shoulders and tea cooling beside them. The air was full of turpentine and healing. She asked about the board, the company, his family. He asked about her garden, her routines, the women in her art group. There were no raised voices, no forced apologies. Just two people, talking like the world had cracked but hadn't ended. When it was time to go, Ezrin stood at the door. "I don't know what this means," he said carefully. Nova held his gaze. "It doesn't have to mean anything yet. I just want to be wherever you're willing to let me be." She nodded. "Then be honest. Even if it hurts. Even if it's late." He stepped out into the street. Turned back once. She was still there. Watching. Alive. The next morning, Nova stood barefoot on the studio floor, coffee in hand, the same way she had stood every morning since her escape. But this time someone had been there. She could still feel the warmth in the room, the quiet shift in air, the hum that returned when silence had shared its weight. She didn't know what came next. She wasn't ready to make promises. But she wasn't afraid to see him again. For now, that was enough. Later that week, Ezrin returned to the studio, invited this time. She had moved a few canvases, swept the floor, set out 2 stools near the windows. "Still painting?" he asked as he walked in. "Always." She dipped a brush into soft blue, flicked it across a half-finished piece. "You don't take days off?" he said, leaning against the edge of a nearby table. Nova kept her eyes on the canvas. "Grief doesn't. Why should I?" He let the weight of her words settle between them. "You never used to paint this much," he observed. She looked over her shoulder. "I never used to bleed and survive it either." He nodded, folding his arms, watching her hands move. "You ever feel angry when you paint?" he asked. She paused. "I used to," she said. "At first it was all red. Thick, angry, chaotic. Everything screamed. And now it's quieter. Still heavy, but clearer." Ezrin studied her expression. "You don't seem angry anymore." "I'm not," she said. "I'm just awake now." Nova set the brush down and stepped aside. "Come here." He approached the canvas. It was a swirl of gold and ash. Dark in some places, soft in others. No figures, no title. "What's this one called?" She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "The Year I Forgot to Smile." He looked again. "It's beautiful," he said. "It hurt like hell to make." She turned and walked toward another part of the studio. A wall covered in pinned sketches, charcoal, pastels, watercolors. Many incomplete, some just outlines. "These," she said, "are the ones I never finished. The moments I didn't have words for." Ezrin stepped closer. He saw a sketch of a crib with no mattress. A faint outline of a woman's back, sitting in a waiting room alone. A pair of hands, reaching for a child that wasn't there. "They don't need to be finished," Nova said. "They just need to exist." He turned to her. "How long did it take before you picked up a brush again?" "For months," she said. "I stared at blank canvas every day. Then one day, I stopped needing to explain why I was sad. I just let the brush speak instead." She sat on a stool. "It wasn't about being good at art. It was about not drowning." Ezrin nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to grieve," he admitted. "I noticed. I kept moving, kept building. Thought momentum would fix what broke." Nova gave him a long look. "You can't outbuild sorrow. I learned that." She stood again and crossed the room, opening a small cabinet. She pulled out a portfolio and placed it on the table. "These are the women I work with now," she said. "Widows, mothers, survivors." She opened it. Photographs of hands holding brushes. Close-ups of tear-streaked faces. Bits of poetry written in the margins of sketchbooks. "They don't talk about what happened," she said. "They paint through it." He flipped through a few pages, his fingers soft. "This is more than a studio," he murmured. She looked at him. It's a lifeline. Ezrin's voice lowered. You built something, while I broke everything. You didn't break everything, she said. Just the version of us that thought grief was optional. They stood in silence again, surrounded by pages and pigment. You could share this, he said. With the foundation. Nova raised an eyebrow. You want to fund art therapy? I want to honor the way you survived. She considered him for a long moment. Let me think about it. That's all I'm asking. He moved toward the window, gazing out at the marsh in the distance. I always thought grief was loud, he said. Screaming, sobbing, falling apart. Nova stood beside him now. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's a whisper that never leaves the room. She reached down, picked up a brush, and placed it in his hand. Try. Ezrin looked at it like it was a foreign object. What am I painting? Doesn't matter, she said. Just don't hold back. He dipped it into gray and brushed it once across a blank canvas. It didn't look like anything, but it felt like starting over. It was just past 7 when Ezrin returned to the studio the following evening. Nova had told him she'd be working late, prepping for an upcoming exhibit, but she'd left the door unlocked, a quiet sign he was welcome. He stepped inside slowly. The place felt different this time, not just like a studio, more like a sanctuary. She glanced up from her easel. You came. I told you I would. She wiped her hands on a rag, setting her brush aside. You hungry? She asked. He held up a brown paper bag. Ty, you still like sweet chili noodles? Faint smile. You remembered. They ate in silence for a while. Floor cushions. Dim light from a single hanging bulb. The studio smelled of oil paint and ginger. Ezrin looked up. I've never told anyone what I'm about to say, he said. Nova set her container down. He met her eyes. I talked to her. Nova's throat tightened. Zara? She asked, voice small. He nodded. In the morning. At night. In board meetings. On the treadmill. I see her in places she never got to exist in. Nova didn't speak. He went on. I imagine how she would have looked in her stroller. What her laugh would have sounded like. I picture her fingers wrapped around mine. I hear her saying Dad, even though I never heard her cry once. Nova's hands were trembling slightly. Ezrin, I know it sounds unhinged, he said quickly. I'm not crazy. I don't pretend she's alive. I just talk. Like if I keep her name alive, maybe she didn't leave empty. Nova pressed her lips together. I used to hum to her, she whispered. While I was pregnant, I'd play music through my headphones on my stomach. I thought she'd come into the world already feeling loved. You loved her more in 9 months than I did in all that time, he said. That's not true. Yes, it is, he said, eyes glinting. You were present. You were ready. I was on another continent. She looked at him carefully. But you came back. Too late. You searched for me. I never stopped. The room filled with the hum of a heater kicking on. I kept the crib, he said. She looked over. In the penthouse, he added. I never took it down. Even after you left. Even after the press started asking questions. I kept it. Nova's voice trembled. Why? Because it was the only thing that stayed still when everything else moved. She got up and walked to a nearby shelf, pulling down a small wooden box. She sat beside him again, opened the lid, and held up a tiny pair of pink baby socks. Ezrin froze. You kept these? She nodded. They were the first thing I ever bought when I found out we were having a girl. He reached out but didn't touch them. Just looked. I talked to her too, she whispered. His eyes flicked up. Not out loud, just in my heart. When I'm painting, when I walk past roses, I think she'd have liked flowers. She would have had your hands, he said. Delicate, always busy. She would have had your determination. For a long time, they sat in that bubble, grief not gone, but shared now. Finally shared. I used to hate you, she said quietly. I deserved that. I don't anymore. Ezrin's jaw tensed. That almost hurts more. Nova leaned her head back against the wall. I'm learning that forgiveness isn't a destination. It's just breath after breath. He looked around the studio. You ever think about going public with her name? Nova blinked. Zara? He nodded. I want the foundation to bear her full name. Not initials. Not a fund. I want people to say it. I want them to know her, even if only through our story. Nova swallowed hard. Zara Grace Vance. He nodded again. She deserved to be more than a whisper. The studio was quieter that night. No music. No brushes moving. Just the soft hum of breath shared between two people finally learning how to sit with their sorrow. Ezrin stood near the back wall, gazing at a new series of canvases Nova hadn't shown anyone. Not even her collective. They were different. Darker. Sharper. Almost unfinished but intentional. These are mine, she said, stepping beside him. The ones I don't plan to sell. He turned to her. Why? They're not for anyone else. Just me. He looked again. A woman crouched in the corner of a bedroom. An umbilical cord drawn as a golden thread leading into nothingness. A self-portrait, her back turned, shoulders covered in cracks like porcelain. Each painting told a chapter of her internal story. You went to places with these that most people would avoid, he said. Nova nodded. I had to. I couldn't heal halfway. Ezrin took a slow breath. It's humbling. She folded her arms loosely. These walls watched me unravel, then paint myself back together. He looked at her. Do you still unravel? Every now and then, she said. But now I know how to put the pieces back without begging anyone to save me. She moved toward a smaller canvas, half covered by a cloth. She paused. This one, I almost destroyed. He stepped closer. Why? Because it hurt too much to finish. But it hurt more to leave it undone. She lifted the cloth. Underneath was a painting of her holding a newborn in a hospital bed. Her arms were outstretched, but the child was fading, brush strokes fading into white toward the feet. In the doorway stood a man, phone to his ear, suit perfectly pressed. Ezrin stared at it. His throat clenched. That's me, he whispered. She didn't say yes or no. It was obvious. He stepped back. I didn't know that day would live in you forever. It didn't, she replied. Just the part where you didn't show up. He nodded, slowly. I hate the man I was in that moment, he said. I did too, she admitted. But grief changed me. And maybe it's changing you. He met her eyes. I want it to. She leaned against the wall. You always used to fix things with money. But this couldn't be solved. It had to be lived. I've learned that, he said. The hard way. She studied him for a moment, then walked toward a narrow table by the window. From a drawer, she pulled out a single sheet of paper. A letter, unsealed, folded twice. I wrote this a year after I disappeared. Ezrin took it with care. He read, To the man who didn't arrive, you taught me something. Silence doesn't always mean peace. It means waiting too long. It means doors that don't open. I lost my daughter, but I also lost the version of myself who needed to be rescued. And in her place, I found a woman who can stand, even with scars. If you ever come back, come with truth. Or don't come at all. He looked up. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Why didn't you send it? He asked. Because I wasn't sure if you'd ever become the man who deserved to read it. Ezrin sat down on the studio bench. Hands folded, letter resting on his knees. I can't change what I didn't do, he said. But I can honor what you've done since. Nova didn't respond. She just walked over and sat beside him. Shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath. I used to imagine us in a different life, she said. Where nothing was lost, he asked. No, where we survived the loss without becoming strangers. He nodded. That's still possible. She turned to him. Maybe, but it won't be built with apologies. I'll show up with presence this time, he said. And patience. He nodded again. And letters if you'll read them. She leaned her head against his shoulder, just briefly. Start with one. That night, the studio felt different. Nova didn't ask Ezrin to stay. But she didn't ask him to leave either. Outside, the Charleston sky was deep and quiet. Inside, the air between them was thick, not with tension, but with something unspoken, something remembered. Ezrin sat on the worn studio bench, watching her as she rinsed brushes in the sink. Neither of them said much. She dried her hands on an old t-shirt, folded it slowly, then turned toward him. "I haven't had anyone stay here overnight," she said. "I haven't stayed anywhere that felt like a place I wanted to," he replied. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. She walked toward him, quietly, intentionally. He stood. The space between them disappeared without touch. Her voice was low, measured. "I don't know what this is, or what it means." "It doesn't have to mean anything," he said. "Not right now." She studied him. "And if this is just for tonight?" He nodded. "Then I'll still be grateful I got to be here, in this version of us." She reached for the hem of his shirt. Soft fingers. No rush. Ezrin let her pull it up and over his shoulders. She stepped back slightly, not to admire, but to absorb. He didn't move, just let her look at him like a familiar page she hadn't turned in years. Then she turned and walked toward the mattress tucked in the corner of the studio. Low on the ground, surrounded by books and canvases, framed in simplicity. She lay down, pulling the blanket around her like armor softened by time. Ezrin followed, moving slowly, carefully. They lay side by side, not touching yet, just breathing. The light from the single hanging bulb painted shadows across the wall. Nova spoke first. "I used to lie like this, after she was gone, hoping sleep would come before memories did." He turned his face to hers. "I used to stare at the ceiling and ask her to forgive me. Every night." Her voice wavered. "You think they hear us? The ones we talk to, even if they're not here?" "I hope so," he said. "I hope she knows we still see her." She reached for his hand. Not out of romance, but need. Fingers laced, palms warm. Ezrin didn't lean in. He waited. Nova turned her body toward him. Then, gently, she touched his chest, just above the place his heart had broken years ago. "Touch me like you remember," she said. "Not like you're asking for something." His hand found her waist. Not greedy, not unsure, just steady. They kissed. It wasn't heated. It was slow, careful, like a door being reopened for the first time since the storm passed. When he kissed her neck, she didn't flinch. When he held her, he didn't squeeze. When their foreheads touched, they both closed their eyes, not to escape, but to feel without explanation. There was no rush, no climax-driven passion, just two broken people rediscovering the shape of each other's breath. When he slid her shirt off, she let him. When he paused, she nodded. When they touched, it wasn't fire. It was water, soothing, restorative, cleansing. They moved like a memory, not trying to impress, not trying to erase the past, but simply to exist in each other's arms without shame. Afterward, they didn't speak. Not because there was nothing to say, but because what they'd shared didn't need translation. Ezrin watched her chest rise and fall. Nova's hand rested near his, eyes closed, calm, and for the first time in years he didn't feel haunted. He felt held. She turned to him in the dark. "If this is all we ever get, just tonight, will you still carry it gently?" He looked at her. "I'll carry it like it's the only thing I got right." The morning arrived slowly. No alarm, no rush, just the soft creak of wood and the scent of leftover paint. Nova stirred first. Wrapped in a blanket, hair tousled, she watched the light change across the floorboards. The weight of the previous night still lingered, but not heavy, just present. She glanced over. Ezrin was already awake. He lay still, watching her, not with hunger, but with something quieter. Gratitude. Neither of them spoke for a few minutes. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, intentional. Finally, she sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Ezrin followed. Nova's voice was soft. "You didn't ask to stay. I didn't want to make a request of the moment," he said. She looked at him. "Good." He got up, found his shirt, pulled it on without a word. Nova moved toward the sink, filled a kettle, lit the burner. As water heated, they moved around each other like people who knew the rhythm, but weren't ready to dance. He sat at the small table in the corner. She poured 2 mugs of coffee, set one down in front of him. No cream, no sugar, just memory. She took a sip, then asked quietly, "What happens now?" Ezrin didn't rush to answer. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm not trying to write a future you're not ready for." Nova nodded. "I'm not ready for declarations. I'm not here to perform one." She held her mug with both hands, eyes scanning the floor. "I meant what I said last night. This doesn't define anything." "I know, but it doesn't erase anything either." "It wasn't meant to." He leaned forward. "I didn't stay because I thought it would fix things. I stayed because it felt like something real." Her jaw tightened. Not defensive, just thoughtful. "I believe you," she said, "but I'm still building something here. Quietly, carefully. I can't let anything, even hope, tear that down." "I won't ask you to," he said. "I just want to be present wherever you'll allow me." She exhaled slowly. "I need time. You'll have it. And space. It's yours." They sat with that truth. No ring. No promises. No returning to what was. Just the present handled gently. "I still want to write to you," he said. Nova tilted her head. "Letters." He nodded. "Not emails. Letters. The kind you hold. The kind you can throw away if you need to." She smiled faintly. "Then write them." "Where should I send them?" She stood, walked to the shelf, tore a page from her sketchbook, wrote an address. "Mailbox across the street. I check it twice a week." He folded it carefully. "Don't just write when you feel guilty," she warned. "Write when you're honest." Ezrin stood. "I'll head out." She walked him to the door. No kiss, no embrace, just proximity. He paused before stepping into the sunlit street. "I'm not coming back to New York," she said. "I know, but I wouldn't mind hearing from you, if it's real." He met her gaze. "Then I have volumes to write." The first letter arrived 3 days later. Plain white envelope. Neat handwriting. No return address. Just her name. Nova turned it over in her fingers a few times before opening it. She didn't read it immediately. She made tea first, sat by the window, let herself be ready. Then she unfolded the page. "Dear Nova, I don't know what today is for you. I only know what it is for me. One of those mornings when you wake up thinking everything is the same, until you realize it isn't. I walked past a store window this morning. There was a father holding a toddler while the mother adjusted her tiny hat. I wondered what Zara would have looked like in a winter hat. I didn't cry. I just stood there, quiet, still. I'm learning that grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a shadow standing next to you in line at the bakery. Thank you for letting me write. I hope you're painting today. I hope you're okay. E. Nova didn't respond. Not because she was angry, because it didn't require one. The truth in it stood on its own. The second letter came the following week. Then another. She never told him when they arrived. But she read every one. Twice. Sometimes 3 times. He wrote about mundane things. About stepping out of a meeting because a certain song came on in the elevator. About a dream he had of a little girl running across a beach. About learning how to slow down. In one letter he admitted, "I stood in her nursery last week. The blanket was still folded in the crib. I sat in the rocking chair and whispered her name. I think I needed to hear it out loud. For her. For me. For you." Nova sat with that one for hours. She didn't cry. She just painted. Soft strokes. Gold hues. A girl on a beach. Alone, but smiling. She pinned it to the studio wall with no title. One evening, weeks after the letters began, Ezrin arrived in Charleston. Unannounced. He didn't go to the studio. He didn't call. He left an envelope in her mailbox. "Passing through Atlanta. Didn't want to crowd your space, so I'm just sending this note instead. Asterisk, I saw a mother today, kneeling by a small grave. She had a toy in her hands. I don't know what she whispered, but her grief looked familiar. Asterisk I sat in my car and waited until she left before I walked over. The headstone read, "Loved for a moment, missed for a lifetime. I thought of you, and I hoped that even in missing, you felt held." Asterisk. This time, Nova wrote back, "Your letter made me pause. Not in pain, in understanding. Asterisk grief used to visit me like a storm. Now it comes like rain tapping gently on windows. Some days I still flinch. But I also plant things now. And things grow. That must mean something. N." Ezrin read it 3 times that night. He didn't respond immediately. Some words deserve room to echo. Over the next 2 months, they exchanged 5 more letters. Not every week. Not on a schedule. Just when it felt real. In one, she told him about the young girl in her art group who painted a tree with no roots, and how it reminded her of herself at 24. In another, he shared how he'd stopped attending the annual board gala. It felt too loud for a man trying to live quieter. Eventually, the letters became more than reflections. They became memories, shared stories, tiny steps toward something not named. One letter from Nova arrived with a single pressed rose inside. No note, just a flower. Ezrin kept it in the back of his journal. And for the first time in 3 years, they were learning how to know each other again. Not through roles, not through grief, but through pages and patience. The ballroom buzzed with quiet elegance. Floor-length dresses, black tuxedos, glasses clinking, laughter rising in low waves. The Zara Grace Foundation annual gala had doubled in attendance this year. His keynote speaker was scheduled for 8:10 p.m. sharp. Ezrin arrived at 7:45, alone. He greeted donors with a polite nod, shook hands, thanked sponsors, but his eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. Nova hadn't confirmed she would come. She hadn't said no either. He clung to that space in between. At 8:02 p.m., a volunteer leaned toward him. "There's someone asking for you at the side entrance." His chest tightened. He excused himself and moved through the service corridor. When he stepped outside, the cool Atlanta air met him. And so did she. Nova stood beneath the string lights, wrapped in a navy shawl. Her dress was simple, her makeup barely there. But her presence, it was grounded, different from the last time. Stronger, lighter, more whole. He didn't speak right away. Neither did she. Their eyes carried the conversation for them. Finally, Nova said softly, "It's a beautiful night." Ezrin nodded. "It is now." A pause. She raised an eyebrow, playful. "That was cheesy." He smiled, just barely. "Maybe, but not untrue." He motioned toward the hallway. "They have your seat ready, right up front." "I won't stay long," she said. "Just wanted to see it for myself." "The foundation? Everything it became." Ezrin stepped closer. "It wouldn't exist without you." "That's not true." "It is," he said. "You gave the pain meaning. I just followed your brushstrokes." Inside, the MC's voice echoed faintly. "They're about to call you up," Nova said. Ezrin looked at the ballroom doors, then back at her. "Come in with me." She hesitated. "I don't want to be photographed," she said. "Not tonight. I'll clear a path." "That's not what I meant." He nodded, then offered gently, "Come anyway." They walked in together, not holding hands, not side by side, but present. People noticed, but no one asked. Some stories speak for themselves. Nova slipped quietly into her seat. Ezrin stepped onto the stage. The spotlight wasn't as blinding as it used to be. He adjusted the mic. 3 years ago, he began. "I lost my daughter before I ever got to hear her laugh." Silence rippled across the room. "I also lost a version of myself that night. The one who thought success meant showing up on spreadsheets, not in hospital rooms." He scanned the room. His eyes landed briefly on Nova. She was named Zara Grace. And this foundation isn't just about grants or galas. It's about making sure no other parent walks through grief alone and unheard. Nova listened quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just nodded. Because it was the first time he said it all publicly. and it was the first time she believed he wasn't just saying it for a stage. After the applause, he found her outside again, this time by the valet circle. "Leaving already?" he asked. "You said everything that needed to be said. Thank you for coming." Nova turned toward him, hands folded in front of her. "You honored her. I honored you both." A pause. Then, "I'm proud of what you built." Ezrin's voice lowered. "I'd trade all of it to go back." She nodded slowly. "But we can't. We can only go forward with what we carry." She turned to leave but paused. "Atlanta suits you," she said. "Charleston suits you better. Then maybe we meet in the middle next time." He smiled. "I'll be there." 2 weeks after the Atlanta fundraiser, Nova stood outside a glass building bearing her daughter's name, the Zara Grace Foundation. She didn't walk in like a guest. She walked in like someone who had finally made peace with why the building even existed. Ezrin met her in the lobby. He didn't greet her with a handshake or a smile. He simply said, "Thank you for coming." Nova held a slim folder in her hand. "I'm not here for a favor. I know. I'm not here for you. I know that too." She looked around the lobby. The framed photos. The mission statement etched on the wall. "I'm here for her," she said. And that was enough. They walked side by side through the corridor. Inside the boardroom, 10 chairs circled a large oval table. A few familiar faces from the gala were already seated: foundation directors, medical advisors, grief therapists, and 2 major donors. They stood when Nova entered. Ezrin motioned toward the seat beside him. Nova paused, then chose a seat at the opposite end. Ezrin respected the distance. Introductions began. Nova listened first. Measured, focused. Then came her turn. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't glance at notes. She just began. "I'm not a CEO," she said plainly. "I'm not a doctor. I didn't come here to network or expand my resume." The room fell quiet. "I came here because I survived something most people don't talk about. And for 3 years, I've watched women grieve in silence. Wives, sisters, mothers. Because society tells them to move on when there's nowhere to go." She looked directly at a donor. "You don't move on from your child. You move through it." The woman blinked back tears. Nova continued. "I've led workshops for women who've buried babies without naming them. I've painted beside mothers who miscarried alone in parking lots. And I've seen what happens when you give someone a canvas instead of a clipboard." She laid her folder on the table. "These are proposals for the Foundation's art healing expansion. Rural cities, grief collectives, traveling studio residencies. It's not just therapy. It's survival." The room was still. Then, a therapist spoke softly. "You're describing the program we didn't know we needed." A board member nodded. "You're describing the program I wish had existed when I lost my first son." Ezrin stayed silent, watching, listening, learning. After the meeting, people filtered out slowly. Nova gathered her papers, calm but quiet. Ezrin approached but didn't intrude. "I didn't expect you to lead," he said. She glanced up. "I didn't come to lead. I came to serve." They walked out of the building together, not in a rush. At the exit, Nova turned to him. "This doesn't change anything between us. I know. I still don't want titles. I'm not asking. I still live in Charleston." He smiled. "And the Foundation's new art wing will launch there first." Nova gave a small laugh. "Convenient." "No," he said gently. "Intentional." She looked at him for a long beat. "You're not the man I left. I've worked hard not to be. Don't stop." "I won't." They didn't hug. They didn't promise to meet next week. They simply stood beneath the name of a little girl they never got to raise, and agreed they could raise something else together. The first time Ezrin saw her house, it wasn't through photos or a Google search. It was by invitation, handwritten, folded in one of the letters she'd mailed. "If you're ever in Charleston with nothing but honesty in your hands, come by. There's a porch and a spare mug." He stood on the gravel path now, 3 weeks later, holding a small bouquet of fresh lavender and a quiet nervousness. The cottage was modest. White siding, navy shutters, flower boxes under every window. The porch swing creaked in rhythm with the breeze. It looked like peace had unpacked its bags and stayed. Nova opened the door before he could knock. No makeup, no shoes, no hesitation. You came. You asked. She stepped aside, letting him in. The house smelled like cinnamon and rain. Books were stacked near the fireplace. A woven rug lay beneath a thrifted coffee table. Artwork, hers and others, lined the walls. Nothing matched, but everything belonged. Ezrin scanned the space. This place looks like you. Nova offered a soft laugh. Because I built it. No decorators? No distractions. They sat on the porch with tea. The lavender rested on the table between them. I wasn't sure if you'd come, she said. I was afraid you'd ask and not mean it. I only ask when I mean it. He looked out at the marsh in the distance. Does it ever get lonely here? Nova sipped her tea. Sometimes. But it never feels empty. He nodded. I can feel that. Inside, a painting hung above the mantel. It wasn't of sorrow. It was a sunrise. Brushstrokes messy. Colors bold. New? He asked. I painted it the week after we met at the fundraiser. Why those colors? They made me feel like I had options. He stood and walked to the painting, hands in his pockets. You ever think about selling this place? No. Why not? She looked at him. Because I finally found a home I didn't have to shrink inside of. He turned to face her. And if I asked where I fit in that world? Nova paused, then answered honestly. You don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But you're welcome to visit. Just don't rearrange the furniture. He smiled. I wouldn't dare. Later, they walked through her small backyard. Raised garden beds, a stone bench, string lights hung from tree to tree. This is where I sit on the hard days, she said. Still have them? Of course. But they don't define the week anymore. They sat on the bench in quiet. Ezrin reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded page. Letter. He handed it to her. She opened it. I don't want to rebuild what we had. I want to discover something we haven't ruined yet. Not a version of us from before, but a version we can meet as we are now. You whole without me. Me honest with you. If all I ever get is this seat beside you under these lights, I will call it more than I deserve. Asterisk. Nova read it twice, then folded it slowly. I'm not ready to define us. I'm not trying to. She looked at him. But I'm not afraid of you anymore. Ezrin nodded. Then that's enough for me. The sun dipped lower behind the trees. They didn't touch. They just sat in the space between healing and history. The Charleston garden hadn't changed. The same wrought iron benches. The same trellises bursting with roses. The same hush in the morning air that made even the birds sing quieter. But today Ezrin brought no bouquet. Only memory. And a small candle. It was Zara Grace's birthday. And the anniversary of her passing. A date forever knotted in time. He arrived early. Took his usual seat at the curve of the garden's central path. He didn't check his watch. Didn't pace. He had learned to wait without needing. At 8:07 a.m., Nova appeared. Same linen shawl. Hair pinned back. A single white rose in her hand. She didn't smile. But she didn't frown either. She walked to the bench and sat beside him. They didn't say hello. They never did on this day. For several moments they sat in silence, watching the petals flutter in the breeze. Ezrin lit the candle and set it between them on the stone armrest. The flame flickered once, then steadied. Nova placed the white rose beneath the bush that had bloomed the year she disappeared. I planted that one before I left, she said softly. Ezrin looked at it. It's still the first to bloom every spring. She nodded. Maybe she's still saying hi. A mother passed by with a toddler in tow. The child laughed, free and full. Nova glanced up, watching. Ezrin did too. But neither turned away. Last night I dreamt of her, he said quietly. She was sitting in your studio, painting over one of my letters. Nova's lips curved slightly. Was she any good? She had your hands. She looked at him. Then she was excellent. They stayed there for over an hour. No phones. No photos, no watchers, just presence. Shared, earned, honest. Eventually, Nova pulled a folded paper from her purse. I wrote something this time, she said. Ezrin didn't reach for it. She began reading instead. Asterisk to our daughter. You were never just a loss. You were our first yes. The softest heartbeat in a loud world. We never dressed you, never rocked you to sleep, but we remember your weight in ways no one else ever will. Asterisk. Asterisk, you taught us how to survive when there was nothing left. And because of you, we speak slower, hold longer, and breathe deeper. Asterisk. Happy birthday, Zara Grace. We see you still. Ezrin didn't speak. He just blinked slowly, letting the words settle. I didn't bring anything to read, he finally said. But I talk to her every time I see the color lavender. Nova nodded. I talk to her every time I smell cinnamon. They smiled. Not wide, but warm. The candle had almost burned out now. Nova stood. Ezrin did too. She looked at him. I'll be here next year. I will too. She raised an eyebrow. You sure? He held her gaze. Yes, not out of guilt. Not out of habit. Out of love. She touched his arm lightly. See you soon, Ezrin. He paused before stepping back. Take care of her, Rose. Nova smiled gently. I always do. A week had passed since the garden. Ezrin hadn't sent another letter. Nova hadn't asked for one. But something had shifted, not between them, but within them. They were no longer a story of what was lost. They were learning to be a story that didn't need to be rewritten, just continued. Quietly, without rush, without title. They met on a Sunday afternoon. Not planned. Nova had invited him to a local gallery where two of her students were exhibiting for the first time. Ezrin showed up 15 minutes early. She didn't look surprised. Still early to everything now? She teased. Trying to correct old patterns. Good. Stay consistent. The gallery was small but vibrant. Ezrin admired the work. Not for technique, but for what was behind each piece, grief transformed into color. He stood before a canvas of a girl flying above a cityscape, hands open, heart exposed. This one's brave, he said. She was 13 when she painted it, Nova replied. Lost her sister in a flood. Didn't speak for a year. But when she paints, it's like she never stopped feeling. He nodded. She found a language. Nova looked at him. So did we. Later, they sat at a sidewalk cafe with iced tea and soft jazz humming in the background. No tension. No weight. Just two people finally being. Ezrin set his glass down. I've been thinking. Nova raised an eyebrow. Dangerous. He smirked. Not this time. He leaned forward. I don't want to date you. She blinked. Excuse me? He clarified. I don't want to take you to dinner on Fridays. I don't want to label this. I don't want to define us like the world expects. Nova crossed her arms, waiting. I just want to keep showing up, he said. To galleries, to garden benches, to quiet moments like this. Not because I'm chasing you, but because you're where I'm home. Nova was silent for a long moment. Then she said, that might be the most honest thing you've ever said. Ezrin looked at her. I've had practice. I noticed. She leaned back in her chair. You know what scares me? He shook his head. That one day you'll forget, and we'll fall into something that looks like before. I won't, he said without pause. And if you do, I hope you remind me, the way you always do, with truth, not tolerance. She smiled. I like who you are now. He met her gaze. I like who you made space to become. They didn't hold hands across the table. They didn't toast to anything. There were no declarations. No relapses into romance. No desperation to define it. Just presence. When the check came, she paid. He didn't argue. She leaned in as they stood. I'm not your partner. I know. I'm not your girlfriend. I'm not asking you to be. But I'm not a stranger anymore either. He nodded. You're the page I'll keep writing on, even if the pen runs out. They walked back toward her car. At the corner, she paused. I'm going to the coast next month. To teach. He tilted his head. Will you write? I might. He smiled. I'll still write back, even if you don't. She looked at him one last time. You're doing okay, Ezrin? Because you let me. She touched his shoulder briefly, then left. No promises. No rewind. Just a soft continuation. 1 year later, the Charleston roses bloomed brighter this season. Maybe it was the warmer spring. Maybe it was the quiet promise life makes after loss, to bloom again. Anyway, Nova sat on the garden bench, a small tin of watercolors in her lap. Ezrin walked in with a thermos of tea and 2 mismatched mugs. He said nothing, just poured. They didn't need greetings anymore. Their presence was enough. Still using that brush set I mailed you? He asked. Nova dipped into a soft gold. They're worn. Means they're real. She looked at him. You're still writing? Every first Sunday. You mailing them? No. I just put them in a box. Why? He sipped his tea. Because they're for her. Not for you. A child ran past the path, chasing a bubble. Nova watched her disappear behind the rose arch. Ezrin followed her gaze. Do you ever wish? No, she interrupted gently. I just wonder. They sat in silence, watching the garden. Ezrin reached into his satchel and pulled out a small, folded paper. Not a letter. A photo. He passed it to her. Nova unfolded it slowly. It was a candid snapshot, taken months ago during one of her workshops. She was laughing, paint on her cheek, a little girl beaming beside her. I asked the mom if I could print it, he said. Thought you'd want a reminder. Nova traced the edge of the photo. This is the kind of memory we get to keep, she said, without ache. Later, they walked the path around the outer fence. Nova paused beneath a tree. You know, she said, I used to think survival meant not needing anyone. Ezrin waited. But maybe survival just means learning how to let someone walk beside you, without carrying your weight. He looked at her. I'd walk beside you for as long as you let me. She nodded. Then keep showing up. That's all. The sun sank lower. They returned to the bench. The candle, same one every year, was lit again. Ezrin pulled out a folded card. He placed it at the base of the rose bush. Nova didn't ask what it said. She didn't need to. Somewhere between the stillness and the breeze, between her brush and his silence, a new story had taken root. Not about repair, not about reunion, but about rhythm, quiet, present, earned. In the months that followed, they didn't move in together. They didn't define the relationship. They didn't make announcements, but they did share gallery openings, foundation strategy calls, evenings at the coast. And once a year, always on the same day, they returned to the Charleston garden. Not to grieve, but to remember, to sit side by side beneath the roses. Not as what they were, not as what they could have been, but as what they chose to become. Present, honest, and quietly enough. Dear family, if you've made it to this final moment, this story was for you. If you've ever learned how to love again without rushing or naming it, comment down below. And please like this video so someone else can discover this healing journey too. From everyone here at Mr Hearthline Stories, thank you for being part of a story that didn't need noise to be powerful. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to this wonderful family. We'll see you in the next chapter.